So for today's project, I'm using some new items from the holiday catalogue. I'm using the Swirls and Curls embossing folder, which is just gorgeous. And I'm using a sentiment from the Merry Christmas to All stamp set, which is this one down here, which is smaller than the actual size. This is the actual size of the sentiment. And my new favourite thing, shimmer paint. I'm using Frost White, and what I've done is I've put a little bit into a spritzer and then I've mixed it with rubbing alcohol. And whilst this is really small, all I did was take the end of my spritzer, just the end of it, and I just dipped that in, wiped it on the edge of the spritzer, did it again, then filled it with the rubbing alcohol and shook it up. And that's the mix that I use for my Shimmer Spritz, as I call it. So whilst it's a small bottle, it goes a really long way, and I just love this stuff. The other decorating item I'm using is the snowflakes and the swirl from Swirly Snowflakes, and that's the coordinating die cuts for the snowflake sentiments, which is in the annual catalogue and was also around last year. Now, my original card used the framelit from the Blended Seasons bundle, the Stitched Seasons framelits. It had these three, and I used the middle one for my sentiment. But as this set is no longer available as of the 31st of August, I'm just going to use a plain oval for my card. I may or may not use a scalloped oval behind it, I'm not sure yet. So to make the card, I have pre-cut an oval. I've cut a sheet of cardstock in half and then scored that in half for my card base. Then I have a matching layer of cardstock, and that is just trimmed 1/2 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch less in height and width. And then I have cut another piece of just plain white cardstock, 1/2 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch smaller again, and I've got something to show you with this and the Corrugated Dynamic Impressions embossing folder. Just something that I think is really cool with that. So I'm going to stamp my sentiment. Whenever you're doing embossing, make sure you use your embossing buddy. It just helps get rid of all those little fine pieces of embossing powder. So give that a good rub, and then I'm going to ink up my stamp. And because it's photopolymer, I'm using this behind there so that I get a nice clean stamped image. Now, that is quite tight stamping the image within this oval, but it does give a beautiful effect. Now I'll just go heat emboss. There we go. How gorgeous is that embossing, and the font is just beautiful. And next step is to use the embossing folder, and all the new embossing folders have this line down here, so you can actually line your paper up in there and get it straight. It's a really cool addition to the embossing folders. Now this one is just one of the normal ones, it's not the really thick ones, so no need to spritz your paper, and you just pop it in. So here we have our beautiful swirls and curls. And now this is where the magic really starts beginning. So whilst it's a beautiful pattern, what we're going to do is we're going to spritz and then get this beautiful shimmer on just the swirls and curls. Now when you leave your spritzer, you will find that the paint will settle. I've found instead of keeping it like this where it all pools at the bottom, if I leave it on its side, when I mix it up, it mixes a lot easier, and I've just found that a lot easier. The other thing I do when I spritz is I spritz from quite a height, and I'm actually doing that into a box to control my glitter. So here we are. You see all that beautiful shimmer on there. Now don't be alarmed that it's kind of a bit warped at the moment. I'm just going to put that aside to dry, and it will straighten out as it dries. And I did do probably 5 or 6 spritzes on that because I want it to be super sparkly. Now while that's drying, I will get my snowflakes happening and my swirls, and I'm also going to spritz them too. Okay, now I told you I was going to show you something a bit special to do with this small piece of white cardstock using the corrugated folder. Now the corrugated folder is one of the textured impression folders, which means you do need to spritz your paper with water. When you use this folder, make sure this part feeds in under the big shot first, so when you open it up like that. I've seen where some demonstrators were feeding it this way and it was cracking the paper, but I've had no problems doing it this way. So we've got our corrugated cardstock now. See those lovely little ridges? And what I'm going to do with that is, not sure if you can see down the edge of this card, just there, what I did was to give extra height behind my layer, I actually attached it onto the corrugated finish, and then that just gave it a little bit more stability than when I'm using dimensionals. I think I'm going to use the folder a lot for that. So I'm going to start assembling the card now. I still like using my multi-purpose glue. If I don't get it in the right place to begin with, it's really easy to move around. So I'm just going to pop a fair bit of glue on here and make sure that I get some of the raised edges fully covered so that I've got good contact with the other cardstock. Then I'm just going to flip that over for now. I'm just going to pop that on like a layer, and then just so that I do get good contact with both of the cardstock, I just leave a large block on it until the glue gets a chance to stick. And then I'm going to repeat the process to adhere to my card base. You could use double-sided tape for this, especially like multi-purpose glue when it comes to putting layers on, just so that you get the opportunity to position them really well, because I don't always do it 100% the first time. And again, I'm just going to pop my block on and leave that for a few minutes while it sets. Alright, Now the fun part begins. So just make sure I've got the card the right way. Oh, and I almost forgot, I'm also using this Bermuda Bay ribbon. Even though this is Pool Party, the Bermuda Bay looks perfect. So now we're going to start putting the card together. So my sentiment's going to pop in the middle, and I'm going to use dimensionals for that. And just underneath that, I'm going to cut some ribbon. And just place underneath. Use the dimensionals to do that as well, just to hold it in place. I like using the mini dimensionals. I do have small fingers, so I don't find any problems with using them. And most of the time I also have long fingernails, so it's really easy to pick them up off of the pad as well. I'm actually going to use the glue dots to get this where I want it. Or I could just use tape. I'm just going to have them opposite each other. Oops. Probably a good idea to do the tape first. So I'm going to lift off backings and position this in the center, maybe a little bit closer to the top than the bottom. Like so. And now we start to decorate. So with the swirls, I've also spritzed them and let them dry, and I'm just going to I don't know if you call it off center, off layer them, and I'm just going to have a bit of a play around and work out where I want to place the elements. And what have we got? We can do large snowflake, small snowflake. Just have a play around until you're happy, and when you're happy, pardon me, I'm just going to use glue dots to adhere everything down. So I've positioned all of my swirls and snowflakes, so just to finish off, I'm going to pop on some rhinestone jewels just in the center of each of the snowflakes. Okay. So there we have a finished card with a beautiful silver embossed sentiment with Shimmer Spritz Swirls and Curls embossing. And just to compare the two,